Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to take a look at the Transformers Legacy Evolution Wave 4 Deluxe Class Cyberverse Universe Shadowstriker. Let me know what you think of this figure in the comment section down below. Is it a pickup or a pass? And now let's take a look at the figure's packaging. So here we have the packaging. Starting at the very front, we have Transformers on the side. We have the Legacy Evolution logo at the bottom. We have Cyberverse Universe, Shadowstriker in white text with a white Decepticon symbol. We have a really cool shot of Shadowstriker and our sports car alt mode. We have an open way displaying the figure in the packaging. If you do look at the top of the box, there's a QR code. If you do scan that, that'll show her stats. And if we do turn to the side of the box, we have two really cool artwork shots of Shadowstriker in her robot mode. One more of a close-up of her head and chest, and one more of a wide shot of Shadowstriker in a really cool action pose with her accessories and weapons. On the back of the box, she transforms in 18 steps. There's a product shot showing off her in her robot, her alt mode, and of course her Evo Fusion gimmick. And on the final side, we do have half of the Legacy Evolution artwork. So if you do get another Deluxe from this Legacy Evolution line and put both boxes together, you can complete the artwork. And that is pretty much it for the packaging. So let's now get into the review. Here we have Shadowstriker in a robot mode. Let's take a look at the details, starting at the very top with that head sculpt. We have some really nice silver for the face, some metallic purple for the chin, some dark bluish purple for the main helmet section with some red for the eyes, and of course there's actually a little smaller eye actually at the crest. And I do like the mismatched eye design where one's a bit more circular and one's more of a diamond shape. I do love this huge engine block design on the chest there. I do like how they actually sculpted the wires to look like they're overlapping one another. Really nice glossy red for those wires and some silver for this entire box section. If we actually do look at the entire arm, mostly done in that dark bluish purple with some black for the hand and bicep, and I do love this metallic purple for these kind of piston canister type details. There's of course that same detail repeated on the other arm, but there's actually the inclusion of a Decepticon symbol on this one, which was not included on the other one. And if we do look at the entire stomach region, mostly done in that bluish purple with some really nice silver detailing and this little emblem there done in silver and red. And I do like actually the placement of the wheels at the top of the legs. I think that looks pretty cool. Unfortunately, all the wheels are mushroom peg, but I do like the placement. I think it looks really cool there. And we have a bit of some armor pads at the knees and the front of the legs, and the feet are mostly done in black. So detail-wise for the front half, overall looking pretty cool. Before I take a look at the back half, I actually do have to say a few things. So proportion-wise, not looking very good in my opinion. The arms are super short and skinny. The legs are super long and chunky. The chest is really small but also bulky. So they definitely could have done that better. If you don't know, this figure is actually taking the design, some of the design from the original Cyberverse Shadowstriker. That was a TV series mostly targeted for younger audiences. I actually did check it out a few times. It's been a while since I've seen it, but this is actually a very stylized approach to that character and that design. If you don't know, if you never watched that series, that character was somewhat of a Frankenstein type design. What I mean by is a lot of her limbs, her legs, her chest was completely different. There was no symmetrical designs anywhere on the figure. You know, one of the arms was like silver, one of them was like purple. I'm pretty sure the backstory for that character is like, I think every time she like lost, she would like lose a piece and like Shockwave would like replace it with like another part, you know, and that's why she looked completely mismatched, you know, and odd. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. Again, it's been a while since I've seen that series, but I think that was the backstory. And as you can see here, it's a very stylized approach. A lot of it is actually symmetrical. It's kind of the complete opposite of what it looked like in that TV series. But they actually did keep a few details from that original design, such as the head sculpt. They actually did keep that mismatched eye design that is accurate to the TV series. I'm also pretty sure in the series she did have that huge engine block on her chest again. It's been a while since I've seen that show. I know the head sculpt is accurate. I'm a bit iffy on the chest. I think it is. I'm pretty sure there was a huge engine block on her chest. Either way, even if it isn't accurate, I actually really like that detail. If it was in the show, if it wasn't, I'm still glad they put it there because I think it looks really cool. But that's all I really have to say for the front half for now. But looking at the back half, as you can see, there is a bit of back kibble. I think probably how I would have done it if I made this figure is maybe they could have actually used these panels and maybe hinged them down and like put them on the sides of the legs to actually form like hip skirts or like little skirt piece. I think that would have looked pretty cool. Because then the back would be cleaner and also it would allow the articulation for the legs to be a bit better. Yes, it probably would slightly limit the articulation of the legs moving out, but maybe they could have added like an extra hinge so they could also, of course, flip up and out of the way. I just think that probably would have looked better. Yes, that would be very inaccurate to the original design, but of course this figure is already so stylized. I really don't think it would have mattered at this point if they changed that, but it's not the worst it's not the worst backpack I've ever seen. Of course, there's been far worse with other figures, but maybe they could have like folded this up and maybe placed it a bit of a better way. But if you don't know, you can move these panels out to accommodate the articulation if you didn't know, so that is nice. But overall detail wise, I'm actually pretty impressed. Again, it is very stylized, so if you were expecting a very accurate, Shadowstriker to the Cyberverse series, you would be wrong, but I think it looks pretty cool. As for, of course, articulation, the head can look up and down, tilt side to side, look left and right. The arms can move out and in, forward and back. There is a bicep rotation and elbow bend. There is also a wrist rotation, which is really good to see on a Deluxe. There is a waist rotation. You do have to kind of move those panels out of the way to accommodate that, so that can rotate all the way around. The legs can kick forward, back, out to the side. There is rotation at the top of the leg. There is a knee bend to about 90 degrees, and there is an ankle pivots, and the foot can also pivot forward, mostly due to transformation. Let me just quickly straighten her up, then we can actually take a look at her many accessories. And yeah, I would say articulation is actually pretty good for a Deluxe class figure. And tolerance-wise, another major plus for this figure, which is really good to see. So as for accessories, I'm actually going to start off with the Evo Fusion gimmick, then I'll get into the individual ways you can store them. So the Evo Fusion gimmick, you actually do have to attach to the accessories. So you actually have to get the blaster here, which I'll quickly take a look at. So really nice spike detailing, really well molded. Probably could have used some paint though, like maybe some of that red or silver. And there's also this little back form guard piece. This actually just formed the entire bumper of the car mode. So if you don't know, this figure will actually involve parts forming. So if you do not like parts forming, you probably won't get this figure, because there's actually 2 situations and instances where you actually do parts forming, so probably not the figure for you if you're bothered by that. It never really has bothered me, so that's why I got this figure. But the Evo Fusion gimmick is actually attaching both pieces together. So there's that post and there is that port, and you just attach it to the barrel like that, and this is the Evo Fusion gimmick. So truth be told, I'm not really sure what this is supposed to be. Of course, you just have the blaster attached to this little plate here. I've had actually a few guesses and theories, like maybe it's supposed to be kind of like a blast shield, so the Autobots can't, shoot the weapon out of her hand or damage it, so there's like a bit of a protection for the weapon. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a reference to something for like other appearances. I really don't know if she's ever been in like comic books or anything. If you do know what this is supposed to be, or if there's like a reference or something about this, please let me know in the comments, because I really don't have the faintest idea of what this is supposed to be. But you can put in her hand if you want to, which is a nice option. Most likely, probably what how I'll store it is I'll have the blaster separate from this, because it doesn't look the greatest. It just looks okay. There has definitely been better Evo Fusion gimmicks in the past, in my opinion. But that is pretty much it for the Evo Fusion gimmicks. So now covering, the individual ways you can store the weapons, because of course these are connected, so you can separate these and store them in several different ways. So the entire sort of like a back bumper piece can actually form sort of like a forearm guard armor piece, which I think is pretty cool. So you can attach it to any mech tech port across the entire figure. And I think that looks okay. I think it looks pretty cool. The blaster, as you would assume, can store on the hand, which I'll show off in just a sec, but it can actually also store on the back. I do have to say, this is probably one of my favorite ways of storage for this figure, which is really cool. I didn't even know about this when I bought this figure. This really came as a surprise. I looked at the instructions one day, I was like, wait, what? I did not even know about this. So you can actually lift up. It has to be this flap. This other one does not have it. So there is actually a small little port there, and there is a small little post, and this can actually store on the little back flap, which I think is a really good use of kibble. Yes, there is kibble, but at least they're actually using to their advantage. I actually really like how well this is compressed, because when I actually the first time I did this, I was assuming it would stick out because there's this added piece, but it's actually pretty flush with the other panel, which is really good to see. And you can barely even tell there's something on there. Even from the front, you can barely even tell there is a weapon store back there, which I think is pretty cool. But just quickly removing that, of course, the number one way you can store the blaster is, as you would expect, in the figure's hand, which is typically how I store it, with a little forearm guard piece there. I think that looks really cool. And if you don't know, the blaster is blast jet piece compatible. As for the final accessory, it's actually this kind of riot shield, which does form, if you haven't already guessed, you might already know, the entire top roof or top section of the alt mode. So again, it does involve quite a bit of parts forming for this piece and that piece. So if you don't like parts forming, probably not the figure for you. It's never really bothered me in the past, but I do have a complaint as to the accessories. I'm fine with the blaster. Definitely could have used some paint, but I find it a bit weird how you have 2 shields. This one's the better one. They just included this small little tiny piece there, and all they really could have done, because, you know, I don't really think there's any reason why they had to include this other small little piece. I think it probably would have been better if they just had this piece here be a permanent part of the figure, because you really don't need two shields, and one of which isn't that good in my opinion. I think it would have been fine if they just had this little bumper piece, you know, just kind of tab in and just store back here, because it's a really small piece. It really wouldn't have made the backpack that much bigger, because this entire section here is actually the back wheels and the back portion of the car. These tabs and ports here are actually how it tabs into place for the other modes. So if they just put like an extra hinge and it just stored right there, I think that would have been fine. I guess you could argue, you know, 3 accessories are better than 2, which I do agree. It's not that good of an accessory. It kind of just seems like to me that they were being cheap, like they didn't want to come up with a way of how to store it in this mode, so they just made an accessory, which I really don't like. And also, of course, it already comes with a shield, so it just seems a bit repetitive and unneeded. But just like that forearm guard piece, you can store this shield and using any mech-tech port across the entire figure. So you can store it on the hand, you can store it on the forearm, which is what I'm doing right now. This is how I like to store it. I think that looks the best. I do like the shield. If you don't know, melee weapons, shields, axes, and stuff have always been my favorite. And whenever Hasbro does them, they do them right. Again, it's just a bit weird to include 2, and one of them just kind of a weak, small little square that I don't like. So this is definitely the better accessory of the 2 shields. Just seems a bit unneeded in my opinion, but I think that looks pretty cool. And this is actually on quite a few hinges. As you can see here, there's one at the base, there's one right here, so you can actually hinge this a bit further back on the arm, or you can actually hinge it a bit more forward on the arm, depending on how close you want it to the figure. You know, if you want it to stick out a bit more, or you can actually have it just straight out like that if you wanted to. It's completely up to you. But now for some comparisons. Here she is with Bombshell, the other Deluxe from Legacy Evolution Wave 4, and his review is up on the channel right now. I think they look pretty cool side by side. For one final comparison, she is with Detritus. And I do have to say, with the last 2 Deluxe class comparisons, those 2, Detritus and Bombshell, are definitely the better 2 Deluxes of Legacy Evolution Wave 4. You might be confused by that statement, because I actually have been, you know, giving this figure quite a bit of praise. But Shadowstriker, in comparison to the other Deluxes we've actually gotten in the past few months and years of, like, you know, Legacy Evolution, this is definitely one of the weaker ones. On its own, I think it's a good figure. I just think there's a few things, like the proportions, the accessories and stuff. The Evo Fusion gimmick is quite weak. It just makes it not as good. I think they maybe ran out of money, like maybe they were putting all the budget into like Detritus and Bombshell, maybe like the Voyager and Leader or something, because there's just a few kind of lazy things. This actually might be, I do have to say now, this probably might be the very first time where I actually might like Shadowstriker's vehicle mode more than the robot mode, which really doesn't tend to happen that much for figures. It might happen more often with you guys, but typically I prefer the robot, which with this situation, that might actually change. I think on its own, it is a good figure. Again, just in comparison to the other Deluxes, Detritus and Bombshell here, not as good. And actually, I have to say, the same goes for Strongarm. Her review will be on the channel very soon. I'll actually do a vehicle mode comparison a little later in the video after transformation. She's another one of the weaker ones. We're on her own. She's a good figure somewhat, but in comparison to the other figures we've gotten in the past, the Deluxe class figures, not as good. So I have to say, definitely get, if you're just looking, you know, for 2 Deluxes, if you're kind of on a budget, you know, and you have not a ton of space, you know, if you just want to get only the best figures from each wave, I would definitely get Detritus here and Bombshell. And maybe if you do want Shadowstriker and Strongarm just to experience them, get them on sale. Get them on like Amazon or Hasbro Pulse whenever they do their sales. That is probably the only situation when I'd recommend to get these. But that is pretty much it for comparisons and this mode. Let's now get down to transformation. So now for transformation, what you're going to do is move the arms out of the way and up just to get some added clearance. Then you're actually going to hinge the feet up and clasp them just like that. And then you're actually going to go to the backpack, just hinge this entire section out. And how this is tabbed into place is there's a slot right there and a tab right there. You're just going to hinge this entire section up and make it actually flush with the back of the figure's head. Then you're going to move these panels out. Then you're going to hinge the entire arm section forward on this butterfly joint just like that. And then you're actually going to go to the chest, hinge this entire section forward like that. And then you can actually open up these panels that actually form the entire front hood section of the car and get this other little panel, flip that forward as well. Then you're actually going to get the entire leg assembly and hinge these back to form the front wheels and sides of the car. And then you can actually push this entire hood section down and into place like that. And there is a small tab there and a slot right there. And of course, you're just going to tab that into place like that. Do the exact same thing on their side. and then there is actually slots pretty much on the inside of the legs, and there is tabs on this piece. There's also slots on the inside of the feet and tabs back here, and that's how all of this is going to tab into place. So just align all this up like that on both sides, tap that in, click the feet in, and then you're going to actually bring these panels in. There's a slot there and a tab right here. That's just going to tab into place. Same thing on your side. Then you're actually going to collapse the arms in. So there is a slot underneath the arms, and there's of course tabs right here, and all that is just going to click into place. Just tab that in. And then you're going to get the entire top section or the roof of the car. As you can see, there's a hinge there. You're just going to collapse this in or kind of hinge it in like that. And then there is, of course, slots on these corners and these corners, and of course tabs on these corners on the actual body of the car, and of course tabs on the back half of the car. All that is just going to tab into place. And as for the very last step, you're actually going to get the entire kind of back bumper. As you can see, there is 2 tabs and a port, and of course 2 slots and a post, and that is just going to plug and tab all into place just like that. And that is pretty much it for transmission. Let's now take a look at the details. Here we have Shadowstriker in our vehicle mode. Let's take a look at the details. Starting at the very front, we have some really nice engine block detailing done in silver and some really nice red. I do like how they actually sculpted the wires to look like they're actually overlapping one another. I think that looks really cool. We have some really nice dark transparent red for the windows and the windscreen. There's some on the sides and the back. I do love the dark bluish purple mixture for the base color of the vehicle, with some really nice kind of metallic blue turquoise for these front headlights, and a little bit of an emblem done in red and silver. If we do look at the side, most of the same details. We actually do have a little mirror there, which is pretty cool. The tires overall done in black and red. Unfortunately, the mushroom peg is open and exposed. I never really do like that. Mushroom peg wheels don't typically bother me if the mushroom peg is, covered up, you can't see it. But in this case, with this design, you can pretty much fully see it, which doesn't look that good in my opinion. It's a deluxe. I wouldn't say I'm like surprised, but I am somewhat disappointed. We do have the entire back bumper done in that same bluish purple with a really cool red for those backlights. I think overall this is a pretty fun car. Of course, we do have the top. We have the bottom, overall pretty well compact and clean. You actually really can't see much of the robot, which is actually really good to see. And detail-wise, that's pretty much it. So now for accessory storage, actually someone already did cover that previously. So of course the entire riot shield does form the entire top roof of the car, and that little foam guard does form the bumper. So I already did cover that. But the third and final accessory is the blaster. So of course there's that post there, and there's that port, and that just plugs into place just like that. It would have been nice maybe if they came up with another way, like a second way, like maybe they could have stored it on the bottom, because there is actually that little small post there from the accessory storage and the remote mode. Maybe they could have used that in a second way, like on the bottom. I think that would have been pretty cool, because the only way you can store the blaster is on the top, which is, pretty open in front. It would have been pretty cool if they like hid it away somehow, but that's a very minor complaint. But now for some vehicle mode comparisons. Here she is with Strong Arm, and that review is coming very soon on the channel. Make sure you stay tuned for that. They look pretty cool side by side. And for another comparison, a final comparison, here is with another Decepticon, that being Detritus, and his review is up on the channel right now. Make sure you go check it out after this one. They look pretty cool side by side. And that is pretty much it for vehicle mode comparisons and this mode. Let's now get down to transformation. So what you want to do is just remove all the accessories off to the side, and technically you actually can leave the shield on when you're transforming it, of course, from robot to car and vice versa. If you actually did watch the initial transformation from robot to car, I actually did leave it on. I'm actually going to remove it because it does actually allow quite a bit of extra space, but if you do want to leave it on, of course, that's completely up to you. So what you want to do is just loosen this entire top roof section here and extend it using that hinge. Then you can actually hinge out these little side door flaps like that. And how these were tabbed into place is there is a tab there and a slot right there. Then you can actually just kind of remove the shield. It's just that same post and port system that we're used to, and you can just put that off to the side. Then you're going to move the arms up. Then we're actually going to flip to the bottom, untab the feet from the back, and there is of course slots on the underside of the feet, and there is tabs right there and there. And then you're going to untab this entire leg, and how this was tabbed into place is there is a slot right there and a tab right there. There's also a small little notch right there, and of course a tab right there and a slot right there. The exact same thing on your side. Just loosen that, bring that out. Then you can actually flip to the front, bring the feet in, hinge them in, and then you can actually bring the entire chest panel out, fold these little hood pieces in, get that other little flap, fold that in, hinge this entire section up, and there we have the entire legs and chest all done. Let's actually focus on the top half now. So you're actually going to use these butterfly joints, hinge them back like that, and then you're going to get this entire hinge section here. There is a tab there and a slot right there that's just going to collapse into place like that. And let me just quickly straighten her up. And that is pretty much it for reverse transformation. Let's now get down to the final thoughts. Now for the final thoughts for the Transformers Legacy Evolution Wave 4 Deluxe Class Cyberverse Universe Shadowstriker. I think overall this is just an okay figure. Of the 4 Deluxes of Legacy Evolution Wave 4, this is definitely one of the weaker ones. If I were to recommend any of the Legacy Evolution Wave 4 figures so far that I have in my collection, I've yet to get the Core Class or the Voyagers or the Leader. Of the Deluxes, I would definitely recommend Bombshell or Detritus. Strongarm and Shadowstriker are definitely the weaker figures of just the Deluxes and Legacy Evolution Wave 4 overall. They're just definitely one of the weaker figures I've seen in the past couple months. Are they bad figures? By themselves, no, they're not bad figures. Just in comparison to the other Deluxes we've gotten in the past few waves, they are definitely the weaker ones. So really getting into my thoughts, starting in the robot mode, I think it's overall pretty cool. If you don't know, of course, this is actually taking the original Cyberverse design from the Cyberverse TV series, which I thought was okay. Definitely targeted for younger audiences, but I thought her character was pretty cool. She was kind of the Frankenstein type design of the Transformers in that show. What I mean by that is a lot of her body and her design was very mismatched. It was not symmetrical whatsoever. Like one of her arms would be like silver, the other one would be purple. There would be random patches of like red and blue. Was very mismatched. I thought it was actually pretty cool. So it's very stylized for this figure. Of course, a lot of those design traits and cues that we were used to with that Cyberverse design are not present on this figure, which, of course, people could think is good or bad, really depending on your opinion. I think it's fine that it's stylized. I don't think that's the reason why I dislike this figure, because I knew before purchasing this, of course, it was going to be stylized. I knew it wasn't going to be accurate to that show. I just think there's a few things here and there that could have been better, but they actually did keep one design trait from that original Cyberverse design on the figure, which is really cool. It's her head sculpt, which is actually really nice. In the show, she actually had a mismatched eye. One of them was more kind of diamond, sort of triangle shaped, and one of them was more circular, kind of a cybernetic eye, which was really cool. And they kept that. I think it looks really good on this figure. I love the red for the eyes, the silver for the face, the dark bluish purple for the main portion or the main bulk of the body. That base color looks really good. I do love the metallic purple on the forearms and the Decepticon symbols. I do love the transparent red on certain areas in the figure. I do think the proportions are probably one of the major complaints I have with the figure, because it's just so off from the original design, and of course just on its own it's just so off, because the arms are really short and skinny, the legs are really long and chunky, the entire chest is really small but also very bulky, so it's just really off. I think the head is fine. I think the size and proportions of the head are fine. Just the arms, the legs, and the chest is just way off, which I guess you could argue that most of the time typically Decepticons are very very, weird in shape and in nature. A very good example is the Bayverse movies. Typically in those films, they were not really that good with proportions. They were very alien in nature. They were almost kind of snake-like. They had multiple eyes, multiple limbs, so I guess you could argue that, but just in my opinion, it just seems way off. It just seems way worse than many other Decepticons and the figures we've gotten in the past few months. I'm not sure. Maybe they did that on purpose, or maybe they were just running out of budget, or just that's how the figure was made. I really don't know. As far as accessory goes, you actually do have to keep in mind this figure does parts form in about 2 different ways. So if you do not like parts forming, this figure probably is not for you. I've never been bothered by parts forming, but I think there is one accessory with this that just does not work for me. I think most people have actually, other reviews I've seen, they actually do agree with me on that, and I'll get to that in just a sec. But the first accessory is this really cool kind of riot shield, which actually does form the entire top roof of the car mode, which I think is a pretty good use for an accessory. I actually do like the multi-purpose of actually using it in both modes. I think that's really cool. You do have to keep in mind, if they weren't going to use the roof of the car mode for a shield, it probably was just going to end up on the back of the figure. So it actually does minimize the kibble quite a bit, which is really good to see. I think it's cool. It is kind of weird, you know, because you pretty much see the entire top half of the car as a shield. It's kind of dorky and weird. Understandable if you don't like it. I actually kind of like it because there's some really nice transparent red. I do love the dark purplish blue on there. And it's a pretty cool looking riot shield. Shield also does come with a blaster, which that could actually store in 2 different ways. The first way is in the hand, which is the standard way. The second way, you can actually store it on a little kibble piece on the back, which I think is a pretty good use of kibble because, of course, there's a backpack. You might as well use it. And it's actually really cool because it stores under this entire back flap and it conceals and it's actually covered very nicely. You can barely even tell it's there, which is pretty cool. Some people could say that's bad. Some people could say that's good. You might actually want to see the accessories. I actually think it's kind of cool how completely covered and almost gone it is. I think that's really nice. And actually covering the backpack for a sec, it's definitely not the worst backpack I've seen. I've seen far worse backpacks over the many years I've been collecting Transformers. I do think since this figure is already so stylized, what they should have done if I was making this figure, if I was making or designing this character, I would have actually used those entire back panels and actually hinged them down to the legs to actually form side skirts. I think that would have been a really good idea, or like leg, you know, skirt pieces. I think that would be a really good idea. Of course, they would have to add a lot of hinges because, of course, they have to get that panel from the back of the figure to where the leg is, but I think that would have looked a lot better. Yes, there would be, I guess you consider, more kibble on the legs. I just think appearance-wise, it would have been better because it actually would have improved the articulation for the legs, and of course, the figure would have a cleaner back. I think that would have been a really good idea. That is just my opinion anyway. As for, of course, the final accessory, what I do not like in my opinion, it's actually this kind of forearm guard shield piece, which I find kind of strange because this figure already does come with a shield, so I really don't know why it comes with 2. I guess you could argue that more accessories are always better. You know, it's better than 2. 3 is always better than 2, which I guess is understandable. I just don't really think it's a needed accessory because it does form the entire back bumper of the car, so there's more parts forming, which again doesn't bother me. I just think they probably should have had this piece just be a permanent piece of the figure. It shouldn't even be removable. I really don't know why it needs to be an accessory. It does play a part in the Evil Fusion gimmick, which isn't very good, by the way. I think they probably should have just had this piece be a permanent part of the figure, you know, and it would still form the back bumper on the car mode. And they could have easily done that because the entire backpack is pretty much the entire back half of the car. So all they really needed to do was have somewhat of a drop-down hinge for the entire back bumper, and it could just sit on the back. And it's a really small piece. I really wouldn't have minded if they actually stored it back there because it's a super small piece. I really wouldn't consider it kibble, and it really wouldn't bother me because it would be barely noticeable. So I think that would have made more sense considering, again, this figure already does come with a shield, and it's a much better one than that one. That one's really tiny and small. But how that piece can store is on the form. It can also attach to the blaster for the Evo Fusion gimmick, which let me know in the comments if you know what the Evo Fusion gimmick is supposed to be. I really don't know. It's quite odd. You just attach it to the front barrel, and I guess you could come up with some explanation or backstory. My guesses were it's supposed to like protect the gun from getting shot at, like it's a little blast shield, so the Autobots can't, you know, shoot at the weapon and it can't be damaged or get knocked out of their hands. Maybe there's some other reason, some other backstory from like a comic book or something, or some reference. If you do know the answer, please let me know in the comments. I've watched quite a few reviews and they've been saying the same thing I'm saying. They're like, what is this supposed to be? I really don't know. Maybe Hasbro could tell us someday. As far as transformation goes, it's actually quite fun. Not really complex or anything. It's very different from other deluxes. It kind of reminds me of the 86 Brawn. You know, that figure isn't complex in transformation. It's just the actual steps and the hinges and the movements are very different from what we typically see, which is pretty cool. I'm glad they're actually trying to make the deluxes a bit more interesting and intricate and less predictable, because, you know, for a while, you know, most deluxes you can somewhat times guess what the steps are going to be, but I was actually kind of caught off guard with this transformation. I was not expecting a few of the steps, which is good to see. I'm glad I was surprised. As far as the alt mode goes, this is actually one of the rare situations where I actually might like the alt mode more, because I think it's just better, it just looks better, and I think it might be slightly more accurate to the Cyberverse design. That being said, of course, again, that design was more of a Frankenstein type design. You know, the entire robot mode was completely a mismatch. Even the alt mode, they showed the alt mode, of course. I think there was actually a Cyberverse toy. I never picked it up, but even the alt mode was completely mismatched in design. The colors were completely off. Like, there was some silver, there was purple, there was red. No, there's none of that on this car. I just think it looks better. There's actually a few kind of design traits they actually kept from that car, which is good to see. I'm pretty sure the engine block is accurate from what I can remember. Again, it's been a while since I've seen that show, a couple years I think, but I'm pretty sure that engine block is accurate, so that's pretty cool. I do like that. I love all the wire sculpted in. I think that looks awesome. I do love the transparent red. I think that's really cool. And, you know, the parts forming I mentioned before, the entire shield becomes the top roof of the car, and the entire form guard forms the back bumper. So if you don't like parts forming, probably not the figure for you, because it does it in two situations, which, again, never really bother me. I think the car is good. Unfortunately, all four wheels are mushroom peg, but it is a deluxe, so I wouldn't say it's a surprise or anything. I do have to say there is a bit of a tolerance problem for the alt mode. The entire top, roof of the car was the shield, and there is tabs and slots. It's supposed to tab into place, but unfortunately, I've never really gotten it completely flush with the actual rest of the body of the car. It does stay, like it doesn't pop off or, fly anywhere. It does stay on the figure on the car, but there's typically a bit of gaps here and there, because there's actually tabs at all the corners of the car, and of course there's slots in the actual roof or the shield, and you would think, oh, that would tab into place, but I can never really get it fully flush, so that's a bit annoying. Also, there is also a small minor gap between the entire back bumper and the shield, because both those pieces are removable. There's a small little crease or crevice there, which I can never get flush either, so there's a few gaps here and there that would have been nice if they could get them fully closed. Maybe it's just like a tolerance problem, maybe I'm just not, tabbing them in correctly, I don't know, but I've transformed it quite a few times and I've never gotten it fully flush, which is a bit disappointing, but definitely not the biggest complaint I have with this figure. So overall, hopefully this wasn't too negative a review. I think it is a good figure, just probably one of the weaker deluxes we've gotten in the past couple months. I would say get this figure if you can find it on clearance. For full price, I probably would say skip on it, and definitely get like Detritus or Bombshell, or just go straight for the Voiders. Get like Bludgeon. Yeah, he is a repaint retool, but I would definitely enjoy that figure more than this one. That is just my opinion. I do hope you enjoyed this review. Please leave all your thoughts on this figure in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time.